Okay, now Claude Code added a feature that I didn't even realize I needed, so I'll be going over this and how you can use it effectively, as well as a bunch of other things in Claude Code to also help improve your workflows. Now, essentially, when Claude Code is implementing a pretty big feature, it's reading files, writing code, downloading some packages, and then also running tests. And you may have a question as it's implementing something because you're watching it. And you could be like, hey, why did you use that particular library? And in those situations, what most people do is they interrupt the model by doing escape or Control-C and then saying, why did you do X, for example? And that can lead to some problems because the time that it's spent answering your questions could have been used for coding instead. So you basically end up taking more time to implement that feature. And also it does end up adding noise to conversation. So your conversation history for that particular chat ends up being filled with a bunch of Q&A. Now, it's fine to do it like once or twice in a conversation, but if you end up doing that too often, then that can be bad because you end up polluting the conversation with a bunch of irrelevant noise. And that can mean you have less signal overall because you end up having a lot of random explanations in the conversation that the model did not need, but you needed instead. I find that a good analogy here is when it comes to humans. So if you're working on a task and you're in like a deep focus, then someone taps you on the shoulder and asks you a quick question about what you're doing, then it can be quite annoying because then it can take you a while to resume the task again and you've also lost track. And this is kind of like adding a random question answer into the LLM context window. So you're basically polluting it with things that the LLM did not need and only you needed. And if you do this enough, then it can fill up the context window and also degrade future outputs as well. And as I talked about 2 months ago in my 2026 workflow video, the way that I got around this and to not interrupt the main session was by splitting the window and starting a brand new session by doing Claude continue fork session. So it'd be kind of like this. Let's imagine that this is still working away. Then I would do Control D to split the window, do Claude -C -- fork session. And then that would make a copy of the last session that I was running and it made a change on, such as the session over here on the right hand side, and then I can ask some questions. And then once it answers the question for me, I would do Control W to close out of that tab and then just resume in the main session. But now Claude Code made this even easier, so as it's working away, you can do /BTW and then ask a question here. So I can say, why did you import and use AV Foundation? And then press enter. And you will see that it answers a question in line. So you can see that it answered it right over here. And then I can press escape, enter, or space to dismiss this like little window. And then I can ask another question of like, summarize the change so far. And you can see as I'm doing this, the main session behind it is still working away. Now, essentially, this is a side channel built into Claude Code where you can ask any question you want without polluting the main conversation and keep all the context of what was done so far from that conversation so it can help answer the question. Now, the benefit here is like with Fork's context window, we have full context of visibility where we can see everything that had been decided and written so far to help it answer the question. We also have no context pollution because no question or answer enters a conversation history. It doesn't interrupt Claude Code, so as it's answering the question, it can still work away, which means that even if it took like 30 seconds, 60 seconds to answer a long question, during that time, the model is still working behind the scenes on the feature implementation. And also, since answering the question uses the prompt cache of the main session, it means the cost to answering any question is really low. Now, there are some trade-offs here. The first of which is you can't ask a follow-up question. It is single turn only. So if I did /BTW and said, what was the last question that I asked? Then you can see it forgot the last question that I asked. And secondly, it has no tool access. It is read only, which means you can't get it to make a diagram for you, for example, in an image or a file, in which case you may want to go back to using -- fork session instead. So for example, if I wanted to make a mermaid diagram of what exactly is happening behind the scenes, then I would press Command D instead, do Claude -C -- fork session, and then it would load an identical version of that chat, which means that if I entered anything on the right hand side, it would not be copied over to the left hand side. So I could do like a mermaid diagram generator, and this is my own custom mermaid diagram generator skill, and you can learn more about the skill and download it using a free video in my Master Claude Code class. So for example, I could have it make the mermaid diagram here on the right hand side, and then have it make changes here on the left hand side. And now we have the mermaid diagram ready over here, and then I could just be inspecting it to better understand how the project works. So this is one of the key differences between the approaches. I would personally use /BTW / by the way, as a quick question, and then use fork session for any deep dives. So that would be for anything that requires reading files, because /btw can't read files, it only uses the context in the conversation so far. Producing artifacts like the mermaid diagram that I just showed you, and then maybe exploring a different turn or approach. Another way of doing the forking is by doing /fork inside of the session itself, and then it will move you over to forked branch, and then you can continue on with the original one by copying over this command and then putting it into a new window pane. But you also have to add --fork session to this as well. And then you have both of those chats separately, and then you can explore different possibilities, whereby you can see the one on the left is on a work tree and the one on the right is in the main session, and move over to a different work tree as well so they don't conflict with one another. Now the key idea that ties everything together here is context pollution. So as your agent is working away, you don't want to be interrupting it and asking random questions, getting it to go on tangents, having it explain things to you, because that is not necessary for the agent to complete its goal. Only the plan that you specified at the beginning was necessary for that. So you should be using /btw for anything that is a tangent or off topic or something. And if it requires making a file, then you use the fork session. And finally, if you do /btw and you ask a question and you realize that the agent had a fundamentally wrong understanding of what you were trying to achieve, rather than doing escape or Control-C to stop it and then correcting it from there, as I explained in my video last week, you should rewind the conversation instead. So rather than arguing with some stale context where it made a bad decision early on, and then having that stale wrong context polluting 20-30% of the context window, you should instead /rewind earlier on and then reprompt it with the correct prompt that has the additional detail. And that would be as simple as doing /rewind and then going back earlier on. For example, over here, doing restore code and conversation, and then reprompting it with the correct information. I would also recommend watching this video of mine after this one for more details. So these two ideas now tie together, because if you use /btw and you notice that the agent made a misconception or just had the wrong idea, then you can rewind, reprompt it from that point and add additional details to that prompt, and then continue from there. Now, if you are interested in more details, and I cover a lot to do with this kind of stuff in my Claude Code Masterclass. It is the most comprehensive Claude Code class that you will find on the internet from someone who's used it for over 1,700 hours. Some people have emailed me asking me to extend the birthday sale by a few days because about 1 year ago, Claude Code was released, so it's the 1-year birthday sale. So if you are interested, there will be a link down below. And if you sign up to my free Claude Code newsletter, then you will also get access to some free videos from the class. Signing up to it will also give you access to the mermaid diagram generator skill that I talked about earlier in the video.